Thank you guys so much for coming out. Hope you guys enjoyed that breakfast. As always, if there's more at the end, please feel free to grab it. But we're going to go through our Albert Mohler book on chapters 10, 11, and 12, and have a quick discussion here with Pastor Elliott before he begins his teaching, and then we'll do our small groups session at your table, and then we'll be done after that. We'll get out of Dave's house. Our aim is to be out by 10 o'clock. Sound good? Cool. Awesome. Turn to chapter 10. If you're in the book, it's page 83. If it's online, I don't know what page PE
82
has there. 82. I don't know why they couldn't make that the same, but but we're talking, or Albert Mohler's talking about credibility. Such an important topic to discuss when we're discussing leadership, because ultimately, if you've got no credibility, you're not going to be an effective leader, and I would even go so far as to say you're not going to be any type of leader. So, a couple of things to address in here. On page 85, Mohler says, "You know you're credible when the organization senses its need and then looks for a leader, and this leads them to you." This is obviously talking about the context of our work life and whatnot, but I think it's important to note when you have developed a leadership skill, people approach you rather than you go looking, right? That's when you, I think that's a telltale of leadership, or that you're ready to lead in some capacity, because someone is desiring for you to be in a certain position. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's almost like the chicken or the egg concept. Like, what happens first? Do you ask, you invite someone to follow you because you're going somewhere, or they see something in you? And I think it's probably a both and, depending on maybe your age, depending on your status in the company. But yeah, whenever you exercise, leadership is in such small quantities today, and people are so desperate for it that when they see it, I definitely think that they would turn to you and do that. So yeah, I totally agree.
Amen to that. I'd like to correlate this. I know, again, it's in the work context, but correlate this with your family life. If you're married, right? Think about the times when your wife looks to you for leadership and desires to be led in some capacity. Those are things that they are communicating to you that can indicate that you're doing a good job in some capacity. Do they desire to have you pray with them and read the Bible with them and do all those important things that we're called to do, or not? And if not, right, then that's something, I really contemplated that particular part of this book in our personal life, to say, does my wife look to me to lead her in prayer, reading the Bible? Am I leading my kids well? Do I do little things like Zachary with his Awana verses, things like that? Or am I stagnant, and does she in turn just do those things on her own? And I take an honest evaluation, because that determines how credible am I as her husband, right? And so don't think of this just as in a work context, but really take some time and evaluate that. I found that very helpful for me to think through.
And those are conversations that you can have with your wife on a date night. Like, ask her evaluation. Like, how do you think I'm doing in this? And, if by God's grace you're doing well, it's going to be a great conversation. If not, you don't have to take it personal. It's just something that you want to do to get better. Because on page 84, at least in mine, Mohler talks about, he quotes this passage, and he says, "In my judgment, this is one of the most important passages on leadership." He says, "Leadership may once have been conferred by rank and privilege. It may once have been something that was characterized by command and control, top down, do as I say style, but no more. Those days are long gone. Today, leadership is an aspiration. It is something you have to earn every day, because on a daily basis, people choose whether or not they're going to follow you. It's something you have to keep trying to achieve and never assume you fully attained." And that last line is so helpful. So if you want to be a leader, it's the old adage that you see at the gym. Rent is due every day, right? People wear those shirts when they go to the gym. Like, you're going to put in the time every day. Your rent is due every day. If you have that mindset with your leadership, it's going to be very helpful. It's not something that you're ever going to fully achieve and then you never have to do anything more. Like, it's just a constant aspiration that you're going after. So I think that's in the context of the church, like you said, in the home. Maybe it might be a little bit different in your job if you have a title, right? But still, you never want to act like you've arrived.
Yeah, amen to that. Also, be careful on those date nights, because that's a sticky conversation to have. That could go either way, really.
Sure.
So I'll say this, in my experience, be prepared for an answer that you may not like. Hopefully, though, it's a profitable discussion, and those discussions do turn to situations where it's like, wow, I really thought I was doing well at this. I really wasn't, and this is how I turned it around. And then there's times where it's like, okay, I'm not doing well, but she thinks I am doing well, leading in this regard. And I'm like, okay, I feel good about this. So it could go either way. So
it'll go bad if you're prideful. Yeah. So yeah, if you're prideful and she says something and you don't like it, I've been there before.
Yep.
But I would also give prep time. Like, hey, sweetie, when we go on a date night, I want you to do this. You're inviting it to come in.
Yes.
And you're prepared for it then. This could be a good dinner time conversation.
Yeah. Okay. So keeping up with credibility, right? He talks about how credibility can be earned. Talks about the character aspect of that, right? Character is a huge part of that. And then he gives some backstory on Winston Churchill, right? Did you guys catch the part where Winston Churchill switched parties not once but twice? Mm-hmm. Right? Isn't that an interesting fact? That man had such little. I don't know if anyone is a history buff or anything, but like that man had so little credibility when he was elected, and it was amazing that he got elected in the first place. And then he was really a man of his time, where he was built for that situation in World War II and combating Hitler and everything else. And that's really, we remember him for that. For that portion of his life, not what happened previous. But I think it's interesting that you take a person that is so revered throughout time and realize all of his faults right beforehand. And I think we look at leaders, we hold them on this pedestal, and think that they have done no wrong, or they have almost like a perfection or an idolization of this person, not realizing what it took for them to get to that point. And so, PE, what I'd ask of you is, what does it take for these guys to get to a point of honest credibility that could change, maybe not the world, but change in their homes, in their work? What do you think?
Well, honest credibility will start in your own spiritual growth. So if you are trying to encourage your wife to grow spiritually and you're not growing spiritually, what credibility do you have? So it starts first and foremost with you trying to grow in your relationship with Christ. And so that means if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead other people. So I would say it would start there. Then it would start with, I think, other friends around speaking to your credibility because they see fruit in your life. So you can start to build it that way very, very quickly. But you will lose total credibility, like, with your kids. You yell at your kids, to stop being angry with your brother, and like you're yelling at them to do it. It's like, well, Dad, you're yelling at me. Why are you yelling at me when you're doing this? So yeah, I think it starts with your own ability to do so. So you set the standard and an example. So you're never saying, do as I say, not as I do. It's, do as I say and do as I do, because you want those two things to match.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what we're going to talk about is that we can't assume perfection there.
Yeah.
And if you assume perfection there, that's when you'll never step into leadership, because you're like, I am going to fail at this point. This will happen. But his point of Winston Churchill or John F. Kennedy was another example. But if you think of Churchill, I think Gallipoli early in his career was a huge disaster. Like, he just had so many failures, but he just never gave up. And so there's that resiliency, that endurance that we'll talk about in a moment that needs to be there to match the competency. Yeah,
to end on this chapter, where he talks about credibility can be lost, he talks about Kennedy and how he overcame, he was talking about the Bay of Pigs and that whole fiasco, and what Kennedy did was something relatively new, and he says on page 89 that Kennedy, he took responsibility for the disaster and promised to learn from it, right? Something so simple that I think, to your point earlier, it's a humility that we need to have, right? We're not perfect, and you cannot expect to be. We have to be humble enough to say, I messed up in this regard. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me, and move on. And that's going to happen with everyone that comes within your circle, whether it's your spouse, a coworker, or whatever. my boss at my work, he says, I don't care if it's my fault or not. It's always 100% my fault. I take full responsibility. I apologize. Let's move on. Because there's nothing we can do about it. What's done is done, right? Let me take responsibility and just quell whatever situation might be in uproar, and let's move forward.
Right.
And I think a lot of times as men, our pride gets in the way of that. And that's a hard thing to put aside.
Right. We're not aiming for a sinless perfection because we can never achieve that. We want to sin less, so we want that to increase more and more. But when we do mess up or we do fail, and failure is not always sinful, it's just something that happens because we don't live in a perfect world. But if you do fail, you can ask for forgiveness, you can take responsibility, and that gives you credibility when you're able to honestly assess and go, hey, that was my bad.
Yep. Any other thoughts on chapter 10 before we go to 11? Rob Taft.
I just thought it may be helpful to give like a definition of credibility.
Ooh, okay.
That he clearly laid out. I think it encompasses a lot of things. Do you guys have a thought there, or I have a suggestion?
I would agree that he doesn't give a clear-cut definition of credibility. I think that it is assumed that he knows what it is. To that end, I don't have a...
I think this would be his closest thing. True credibility rests in the ability of others to trust what a leader can do. I think that's as close as you're going to get, but what was your...
My thought was the things you say are backed up by the things you do in your life.
Yep.
And the things you say turn out to be true.
Yes.
Right? And so you talk about Churchill and Kennedy. They said things that didn't turn out to be true. They lost credibility in that, but then they gained it back when they acknowledged the truth and said, I was wrong, and I want to learn from it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's his whole point on the last section.
Maybe credibility and integrity would go like hand in hand. To be a whole person, integrity, you're a whole person. There's whole things about you. So yeah, I think that's a good point.
Cool. Any other thoughts on chapter 10? All right, let's go to 11. Leaders are communicators, right? Let's see. The effective leader communicates so pervasively that it seems second nature, and so intentionally that no strategic opportunity is ever surrendered. What does he mean by that? He's like, he goes further in the chapter, and he talks about communicating the same thing over and over again, right? This is your mantra of sorts. And I felt like there's two things to talk about here. Number one, what do we communicate as leaders as it pertains to our Christian walk with the Lord? Right, that would be the gospel, right? And then what do we communicate outside of that realm of when we're in the workplace? Maybe you're not able to share the gospel, and that would be how we interact with other people and how we are viewed by them. And the important thing to note, what I felt about this, is that the two have to coincide. It does no good to share the gospel with someone and then go act like a jerk, because to chapter 10's point, your credibility is absolutely 100% out the window. So, any thoughts specific that you want to jump into on chapter 11?
Yeah, it was right on the first page. He makes a very bold statement. He says, actually, the truth is even more dramatic. Leadership doesn't happen until communication happens. And I can see that both true in successes and failures in my leadership. When there's confusion in the people behind you, that means you've done a poor job of communicating, so that always needs to be increasing. And viewing that as an aspect of your leadership is very helpful. So I think about it with my kids. Like, my kids are most successful at events when we take the car ride over there to talk to them about what we want from them at the event. Hey kids, we're going to go to this person's house. They've invited us over. They've been very kind. Please don't swing from the chandelier. Please don't break their kids' toys. Please don't do these types of things, right? All things that we want to say, assume that they know, but that's poor leadership with the people that are in your car. So leadership is happening even before you get there. That way, when they get there, they know the standard. They know those types of things. So yeah, I think that this was a very helpful chapter for me, just to even make sure like the way that I'm leading is happening through communication. So he tried to say, most people contrast communication with action as if they were at odds, but communication is action. And I think that's true, because what is preaching? Preaching is communication to get people to act. So I think that's an accurate statement of leadership.
Yeah. And he goes into how he effectively communicates, hallmarks of powerful communication. It's page 94 in your book. And he starts listing 3 things. The first is clarity. The second on page 95 is consistency. And then lower down on page 95, the third hallmark of powerful communication is courage. So 3 C's. And if you can make a note of that, clarity, consistency, and courage. All necessary to communicate leadership effectively.
Yeah.
So, for clarity's sake, right, if you have a mumbled message, as it seems, then it's not going to get through. We always, I've been to several leadership summits throughout my time in both ministry and the corporate world, and one thing rings true, and I know he's disgraced now, but it was actually Bill Cosby who said it. He said, you have to appeal to what you think is the dumbest person in the room. And that's not to insult someone's intelligence. It's just to say that the least smart person in that room needs to be able to understand clearly and effectively what you are trying to communicate. Because if they can understand it, that means everyone else can understand it. So, again, not to put Bill Cosby on a pedestal at this point, just to say, what he said rings true. If that person understands what you're trying to communicate, if it's clear and consistent, and you're courageous in doing it, then everyone else will understand it as well. So,
at least diagnosing that in my own marriage, if I think through times where I find that my wife is asking me a number of questions about something, once it gets to a certain point, I don't ever want to be frustrated with her. I think I start to say, oh, have I not communicated clearly? So this is probably more on me than it is even on her, because she's having to ask these types of questions. If I was very clear up front, there probably wouldn't be so many questions, and I'm sure that can spill over into ministry. It can happen at work that way too, but those are ways that I diagnose, okay, am I clear in my communication, and is it consistent? So yeah, at times, just, hey, very clearly, this is what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense? And then if it doesn't, try it again and make sure that it does make sense, because nothing will happen until it does.
Right. I think when people ask you questions, that's a clear signal that you have not communicated something clearly.
But they at least view you as a leader, right? They view you as a leader,
absolutely.
And so they're trying to come to you.
Yeah, and please, again, don't expect to do this perfectly. Yeah. It's going to happen where you think you're being clear about something. This is the worst. It happens to me all the time. I think I'm being so clear and concise about something, right. and then it comes back that whatever task didn't get done or whatever. My kids are notorious for this. And they're like, but you said this. And I'm like, yeah, what didn't you understand? And then one of them will say, well, that doesn't mean, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, man, I have to actually spell this out for you. I can't use implication at all. I have to be absolutely specific about what I what I want accomplished from them. You know what I mean?
Just wait till your teenagers know it all.
And they talk back to you, yeah.
14 and 13, they're already, I see it and it makes my heart hurt. Anyway, so that's, yes, go ahead. Question.
I guess more of a comment at some level, but I think something that just keeps coming up in these conversations is that the leader assumes responsibility for failure.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's very easy to be oh no, this person who I'm leading doesn't get it. Right? But you said oh, they misunderstood. It's not because they messed up. It's because I didn't communicate clearly. Right. And that just reminds me of really understanding where people are at. And I think about Philippians 3 and Philippians 4, both I think verse 1 in both of them. The example is hey, I've already said this, but I'm going to say it again because it's not it's I don't need to, but
no
it's necessary for your account, right? Yeah. And just I think being able to really understand where I need to see do they understand, not just well, they should understand it, right? And I think I think it's easy in our pride to in the end say when someone mistakes and misunderstands or doesn't take our advice or whatever it is, to be well, that's because they're dumb or they didn't think or whatever it is, right? But ultimately accepting that as oh, I failed to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of the hardest part in all of this.
Yeah, listen to Peter. He matches Paul. In 2 Peter 1, he says, "Therefore I intend always to remind you of these qualities, though you know them and are established in the truth you have. I think it right, as long as I'm in this body, to stir you up by way of reminder, since I'm putting off my body. The putting off my body will be soon, as Jesus Christ made clear to me, and I will make every effort to do so that after my departure, you may be at any time able to recall these things. It's just the leader's consistency of a clear message over and over again. You might know this, I'm going to say it again, and you're going to be able to repeat it when I'm gone, because that's the most important thing. The message is the most important thing. So yeah, I agree, Johnny.
Yeah, great thought. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts on chapter 11?
Well, I just think that communication falls on vocabulary. Not everybody's on the same level of vocabulary for understanding the words that you may understand.
Sure.
I don't want to say dumb it down, but you've got to at least be simplistic in the words that you choose, because they may not always know the meaning behind a particular word that you choose.
Yep.
Even when I'm reading books, I kind of go like, what does that mean? I've never seen it. So now I got to look it up.
Right.
So lots of vocabulary. You just can't assume that they are on the same level of vocabulary.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Words matter, right? And how you, if you're speaking and knowing your audience in that regard, right? If you're speaking to a group of people, Albert Mohler talks about when he was giving that speech at the university, and he had the Nobel laureate in the front row, and so he's obviously speaking to a group of people where he can use big words and Greek and everything else, right? But to his everyday congregant, maybe a freshman at Boyce College, not so much. He needs to appeal to his audience, and that's a good thought, certainly, right? We speak differently to our spouse versus our kids, right? Because my wife understands a certain language, and my 4-year-old has no clue what I'm talking about all the time anyway. So how we communicate to different people is incredibly important. So, okay. Let's go to chapter 12. Oh,
Just one quick comment.
sure.
He says in here at the end, and I think he says it again in the next chapter, if this seems too daunting, then follow, do not aspire to lead.
Yeah. Page 96 in your book.
In certain contexts, that's a choice, maybe in the workplace, but at home we don't have that choice to choose not to lead.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
So you'll either do it bad or you'll do it well, is essentially what you're saying.
There's aspects of your life where you can get out of leadership. You can be a normal employee. You can, play on a team and ride the bench at home, right? Make no mistake, you are called to lead your family, and you are accountable for it. So you don't have a choice. So do it. Figure out how to do it well, and that's why we're here right now. I appreciate so much that you guys come to these meetings. This is how you foster good leadership, by gaining wisdom from other people, men that have been married in this group for over 25, 30 years that you can glean wisdom from. That's huge. So if you're younger, take advantage of it and try to learn something new. Let's finish on chapter 12. Leaders are readers. Such a crucial aspect in today's world with all this entertainment, TV, etc. There's been 1,000,001 case studies about how television and other forms of entertainment, whether it be on the internet, have dumbed us down in some sense, where the populace today, we just don't read as much. So you, Pastor Elliott, are an avid reader, and I'd like to say, if you've ever been in Pastor Elliott's office, you've seen his bookshelves, you've seen him prepping for sermon work. How many books do you read during the course of a week whilst prepping for a sermon?
I don't know. That's a lot. So you have the list of commentaries, which is different than a normal book. Then you have other books that you want to be reading on top of that. So yeah, I don't know that I know that number. It's more like pages that you read specifically, because like a commentary, I'll be in Habakkuk now, and I'll read James Montgomery Boyce, and he'll have 12 pages on my section, so I'm going to read 12 pages from him, and this other guy's got 50 pages on it, so I'm going to read his 50 pages, and yeah, I don't know the total of that, but yeah, it's a lot. But yeah, so I do think that this is very wise, and I do think that this is the thing that has caused me to develop the most. I hated reading. Honestly, in school, I hated it. I hated it so much. I had a decent memory, so I could pass by just memorizing things. But now I kick myself, because now reading is very arduous and it's difficult. I actually have tried to challenge myself to grow faster in reading and keep comprehension. And so I watch videos on YouTube to do that, trying to pick up different tricks, because I think I neglected it so much growing up. But now I just see it as vital. Like if I'm going to, this is what it is. It's like if you have something in your schedule that forces you to produce something, you're going to have to do it. If I'm going to have to stand up every week for 50 minutes and speak, I'm going to have to read. I can't not read. I'm not clever enough to just come up with stuff. Like, I'm just not that guy. So what do you have in your schedule that forces you to do that? If your job doesn't force you to do that, then you've got to figure out some other impetus to put behind that to make sure that that's on your schedule. Because we say it in the Christian life, like you have to have your Bible time where you're reading the scriptures. That's the most important thing you can read. You want to be soaked in that, having that infiltrate every thought of your mind. But you got to make time for that. So yeah, because of this chapter, it really started to make me think like, and maybe I'll do this next time, just talking about the leader's calendar. Mm-hmm. Like, you put appointments on there and you keep them. What if you put an appointment to read for an hour and you just put that on anything? And okay, I'm not going to do anything but read for this hour. And that's either at night or that's during the day. I've heard people do that, with their spouses. It's like, okay, I will always schedule in my wife's date night so that if anybody tries to get on my schedule, no, that is on there. It's an appointment. I'm not breaking it. Why wouldn't we do that with reading? Why wouldn't you put that on there to make sure that that's on there? Because if the leader follows a calendar, it's driven, it shows your values. So yeah, I would think something like that would be helpful.
Yeah, you gotta.
When you are looking at commentaries and other articles specifically about Habakkuk, do you actually own that book, or are you doing it mostly online?
So I, by God's grace, own a lot of books. Online, I can get journal articles for free because of my where I graduated from, and other people in the office have access to those, so I can get online articles. But yeah, by God's kindness, what we here at Compass Bible Church Tustin and from Aliso Viejo ingrained is like, the pastors need access to resources. So if we're going to need a resource, let's make sure that we can go get a resource. And I was thinking about it the other day. Like, I think the number was John Calvin had 300 books in his library, and I have 1,200 books on my computer. Like, just on my computer, 1,200 books. I have so much information. It's almost like I feel like bad with what I'm able to produce versus what he had versus what I have at my fingertips. And then that's not to speak of the physical books that I have in my office. So yeah, I try to own those. And now I have to be very selective because I don't want to just gain a book to do it. So Kindle has become, I don't know if you guys like reading digitally. For books that I'm just going to have once, I buy it on Kindle because it's super cheap. And then if I never reference it again, it's okay. So I think that that's a great resource. You put books on your Amazon wish list, and honestly, they will come up. They'll have it. It'll be $2.99, and I buy a ton of books at $2.99, and I'm going to read it once and never reference it again. But it's a cheap book. So if you're on a cheap budget, Kindle's the way to go. But if you like physical books, then get a library card and go to the library. Are they open now? I don't know.
No, they're not.
Okay.
You can reserve them and pick them up. You can't actually read in the library. Actually, Compass Bible Institute, though.
They have a library down there?
They have a library down there. It is open. And a lounge. So please feel free to go down to AV and utilize those resources at hand. It is priceless. I'm going to say this. I'm going to end on this so that PE can get to his teaching. Because as PE mentioned, right, he hated reading. I hated reading. And it is truly a struggle. Some people, my wife could tear through this book in like one day and comprehend the entire thing. And I hate that so much that I cannot do that. It takes time. I have to think and ponder about what's being said to understand it. That being said, what has really spurred me on and helped me in years past because of my wife is she would recommend books for me that were really interesting. And so that would be a word of advice, is to say, start with something interesting to you. It doesn't have to be religious. And I have found biographies of people to be very fascinating. Pre-COVID, I'd sit on an airplane for work all the time, and that's where I would do my reading. Don't read the Wright brothers when you're in an airplane. It's kind of scary to learn about how many bones they broke and how many times they crashed. But anyway, things like that. Find something that interests you. It'll really help develop your reading skill. And then when you get into something like a theological book that may not seem so interesting, then it'll actually help you with the comprehension and everything else. So I would just leave you with that. Any other thoughts and questions on?
This is just a thing for possibly for the future. It's like for the guys who
want to read, particularly if they want to read theology books.
Sure.
I know that AV did it, and we kind of did it for a little bit when we did like the summer groups, but could we do like, at least for our church, maybe like once a year or maybe like once a quarter or whatever, put together like a recommended like reading list?
Oh,
so that,
absolutely.
So like the guys or anybody else really says, oh, I want to learn more about, how to be a biblical guy, and then you could have a list of like, here's like top 3 recommended books, or at least from our staff or whomever that says you could pick these up and read these, and
yeah, that's a great idea. I think we could probably put that together fairly easily, and we could make that happen. Not a problem. Especially since during the summer, so we're planned out through May right now for men's ministry. In the summer, we'll take a break and figure some things out, but we could figure out a reading list before then.
Yeah, we did staff books, and you read it with a staff person, and you got to meet and discuss that. So we'll try to aim to do that during the summer again, so you get an opportunity. Reading and discussing, I think, are really good things because it helps you process.
Yeah, I listened to an audiobook.
Audiobooks, yes.
Classic Dave.
Audiobooks are a phenomenal way to keep your mind engaged in something, and then so like if you drive in the car for work or whatever, then you're listening to that book in the car. You could pick up the book later on during the day and actually physically read it, and you just a wealth of benefit for an audiobook. So, yes.
One real quick one. So he talks about reading old books, right? So there's Thomas Baxter's Pertains, for example. Classic Puritan.
Richard Baxter?
Richard Baxter, thank you. Yeah, no, he got me. So yeah, right. I just heard someone chuckle. So that, anyway, right. You have like a classic Puritan, but then you have the Iliad by Homer. Clearly, like out of all books, that's like one of the most well-known in the Western canon.
Right.
Right. How do you determine like when I should read non-theological books, and like how much should I read? Like, how does that? Obviously, there's no rule, but like, how do you think through those decisions?
So for me, I only read what pertains to like help me grow in my arenas. If I like the book, like the Iliad, it's a great book, and they have those. I think was it Moeller who said they've stood the test of time for a reason, right? So yeah, it's obviously those types of things. That's where, for me, like watching a good movie, if I want to get outside of my realms, is what I do. I watch a movie that way. But for me, what I choose to read, like it is what interests me, but also what I need to grow in. So yeah, like if you need to grow in something, you're not gonna do it just by sitting there and thinking about it. So that's kind of how I make that determination. But yeah, so if you want to, I don't know that there's a 50% you should be doing this, 50% you should be doing that, but I think you could say, hey, sweetie, you want to read this book with me? And then you do like a popular book, and then you do this book. Yeah, I haven't thought through that.
I don't think that there's a percentage, division where you should say you should always be reading, 50-50, right? What Moeller talks about is that you should be reading the Bible 100% of the time, and you should be you should digest that always, every single day. And then on page 104 at the top, he actually addresses this. He says, should leaders read fiction? This is where many leaders admit uncertainty, but the answer is surely yes. Leaders need to read fiction for enjoyment, learning, and for context. Fiction is important because it allows the reader to enter into the times, life, and mind of someone else. Right. And so I think it's important and not bad at all to say that you're going to read fiction, and you can look at something like a C.S. Lewis, like a Tolkien, and say, right? I mean, their books, their series of books, were arguably the greatest fiction ever written. And so, yes, by all means, read it. I think there's a time and a place, and so long as the one thing reigns true, that is, if you are digesting or ingesting the Bible on a daily basis, then everything else is okay. With some wisdom aside from it. We don't want to ingest, books that are not glorifying to God, certainly. But
I think it was a theologian who recommended that guys like pastors should read the book Ready Player One. That's a book, and they turned it into a movie. I haven't seen the movie yet, but they recommended that you see that, and so I can see the value apologetically of understanding what the culture is promoting, because they do so in literature and they tell stories that way. So I could definitely understand you wanting to do that. It does make you a more interesting person. If you like read with your kids and you read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and you can do those types of voices with them, and act them out. That's fun. But yeah, I'm gonna watch the movie is what I'm gonna do. So.
You don't do voices?
No, I read so much. Like that's what I do at my job. So yeah. I don't want to read for pleasure. I want to watch a movie. Alrighty, guys, if you got your Bibles, go to the book of Nehemiah, chapter 6. And I have been really trying to contemplate like this, as we've been studying the topic of leadership, why is it that men struggle so much to lead? What is it? Like, what holds men back from leading? And I'm sure there are a number of different answers, and this is not always the same for every single person. But I have to think up at the top, if not the top reason why men do not lead, is because they're afraid. I think ultimately it has to do with fear. Now, it could be fear of a number of different things. It could be fear of failure. It could be fear of inadequacy. There could be so many different things. And actually on the back, one of the questions you guys are going to ask is like, is there a specific fear that you know that is hindering you from leading? But as I read Nehemiah 6, when we started Dwell this year, it reminded me so much that the opposition to leadership, one of the main weapons of the enemy is to get people to be afraid. And I think you'll get that as we read Nehemiah 6. Take a look at verses 1 to 14. It says, "Now when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arab and the rest of the enemies heard that I had built the wall and that there was no breach left, although up to that time I had not set the doors in the gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent to me, saying, 'Come, let us meet together at Hakepharim in the plain of Ono.' But they intended to do me harm. And I sent them messages saying, 'I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it to come down to you?' And they sent to me 4 times in this way, and I answered them in the same manner. In the same way, Sanballat, for the 5th time, sent his servant to me with an open letter in his hand, and in it was written, 'It is reported among the nations and to Geshem, it is also said that you and the Jews intend to rebel, and that is why you are building the wall. And according to these reports, you wish to become their king. And you have also set up prophets to proclaim concerning you in Jerusalem. There is a king in Judah. And now the king will hear these reports. So now come and let us take counsel together.' Then I sent to him, saying, 'No such thing as you are saying has been done, for you are inventing them out of your own mind. For they all wanted to,'" here we go, "frighten us, thinking their hands will drop from the work, and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands." If you drop down to verse 14, which we'll get to in a moment, it says that the prophetess and the rest of the prophets wanted to, here's the phrase, "make me afraid." Drop down to the end of the chapter, verse 19. "And they also spoke of the good deeds of Tobiah at that time in my presence and reported to him. And Tobiah sent me letters to make me afraid." What is going to stop good leadership from accomplishing what it should do? Fear. So whatever that fear is, know that that is a tactic of our ultimate enemy to stop you from doing what God wants you to do, and that is to lead. Great men in history have faced that same issue. It was Teddy Roosevelt, and I can't remember who was coming to visit him. It might have been Frederick Douglass. I can't remember if him or Booker T. Washington. Who would have been around Teddy Roosevelt's time? Would that have been Frederick Douglass or Booker T. Washington? One of those two, Booker T. Washington. One of those two African Americans were going to come to the White House. Teddy Roosevelt had invited them, and he said he was looking forward to a great meeting. But as he was sitting down to write invite card to him, he said fear gripped him. What are people going to think if I invite this African American into the White House? And he said, at that moment I stopped and said, I'm going to send this out immediately because I will not respond to fear of what people think of me in order to do what I need to do as a leader. See, fear faces everybody. But when we know the right thing to do and we do it, we do not have to fear. There's a great scripture that you should have memorized. It's 1 Peter 3:15. Verse 14 says, who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them. But in your hearts sanctify Christ as holy, always being ready to make a defense. When you are prepared, when you are studied, when you know what God wants you to do, you do not have to fear. And I think this passage is going to give us 3 ways that we can make sure we fight against fear. So number 1 on your outline, if you want to write it down this way, how are we going to fight against fear that tempts us not to lead? You can write it down this way. Depend on supernatural strength. depend on supernatural strength. And I love the way that it was said by Nehemiah there, verse 9. For they all wanted to frighten us, thinking, their hands will drop from the work, and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands. See, there is a focus and resolve to Nehemiah that is very refreshing. And if you as a leader need to know the focus and resolve that you need to have, you just read the book of Nehemiah. 52 days, they got the wall done, except apparently for the doors. It's the last thing that they needed. They are on, Property Brothers, and they're about to finish the house right there. They have done all the renovation. They're ready to go. And it got done in 52 days because there was a focus and a resolve, to the point where Nehemiah at times said, hey, these people are going to attack us. I don't want you to stop the work. Have a sword on your side and have a hammer in your hand. Go to work, and if they come, we're going to fight them that way. There was a resolve to get a job done. And so he knew what he wanted to do. And so as leaders, that's what we've been trying to talk about, the message and the consistency of what you want to do and what you want to accomplish. But if you think you're going to do that because you're such a great human being, or you're so strong and you're so wise, that is utter foolishness. Nehemiah over and over again is a man of prayer, and look at this prayer. But now, O God, strengthen my hand. Do you fear leading right now? Are you afraid to lead your wife? Are you afraid to step up at work? Have you prayed, God, strengthen my hands? God, give me the capability and the credibility, like we just talked about, to go accomplish what you want me to do. Because do you believe that God wants you to lead? And if he wants you to lead, is he not going to supply the power and the strength and the passion and the purpose that you need if you ask? What does James say? You do not have because you do not ask. How often are you praying about it? A desperation to know that God wants you to lead, and I'm going to do it no matter what is going to be happening in me. I love the supernatural strength that he depends on. And this type of strength is so necessary. Go to 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 1. Talking about leadership. 2 Timothy 2:1. 2 Timothy 2:1 says this. You then, my child, be strengthened by the grace that is in Christ Jesus. That's what you need. You need to be strengthened by the grace that is in Christ Jesus, and that happens in prayer. I think a lot of things would change at our church if the men of our church would pray, God, strengthen my hands. Strengthen my hands to do this. I feel afraid. I feel inadequate. I don't know what to do. Strengthen my hands. I'm going to go do it. And that's exactly what Nehemiah did. We need to appeal to this supernatural strength. Back to Nehemiah chapter 6, Nehemiah 6. Notice the focus he had. Nehemiah 6. These people are trying to trick him, okay? They're trying to trick him to get him off of his mission. Hey, you guys need to come visit me. I'll just give you a little bit of insight into how smart his enemies were. Take a look at this. Come meet us, and they want to meet at a place called Oh No. If you're trying to trick somebody, don't invite him to a place called Oh No, because it's kind of tipping your hand as to what's going on. Notice the persistency that they had. How many times? 4 times. Come. Nehemiah's like, no, I'm focused on doing this. So you as a leader, when you have that focus, that is going to help you be able to eliminate things that are going to be troublesome to your ministry. And finally, he says, they send him this open letter, right? This open letter, hey, people know that you guys are going to rebel, and that's why you're doing this. Now you need to come with me. And so I think there's some wisdom here exercised by Nehemiah, who says, well, wait a second, I'm not going to come. I mean, think about this. If it was really true that these rumors were out there, you wouldn't want to be associated with me as well. So why are you trying to meet with me? Nehemiah knows that the work needs to get done. So what is it in your life that is trying to distract you? And that distraction is often driven by fear. They're trying to make him fear somehow. This is what they were trying to do. They're trying to frighten us, to get us off the work that we need to do. We need to depend on supernatural strength to overcome fear. If you do not have that supernatural strength, you will not be able to do so. Now let's talk about fear for a moment. Fear drives everything you do. Do you understand that? Fear drives everything you do. You are fearing something right now, and what you fear, you obey. That's why the scriptures talk about fearing God. When you fear God, now you do the things that God wants you to do. And then when we get to point number 2 in this section, you're going to be okay to just follow whatever directions God has given you from the scriptures, and you won't have to have any sort of fear that, okay, I'm not living righteously, because you're doing what God wants you to do. That's why we fear God. A couple sections of scripture. Go to Exodus chapter 20. Just talking about the proper fear that you should have. Exodus 20. Take a look at verse 20. You should know Exodus 20. It's the 10 Commandments. God encouraging his people to live holy so that they're separate, set apart. But look at Exodus 20. It says this. We'll see two types of fear. You can start in verse 18 and give you a little context. Now when the people saw thunder and flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled. And they stood far off and said to Moses, you speak to us and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die. And Moses said to the people, do not fear, for God has come to you to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. Do you see that there's two types of fear? There is one fear that is reactive, and there's one fear that's reasoned. You begin to fear God when you reason it from the scriptures, when you interact with the Bible. Now that's the fear that you want to develop. The sinful fear is stuff that comes on from the outside. What is going to happen if I do this? Or what if I fail? Or what if I don't know that? That is all born out of reactive fear. And that's what they're doing here. We're being reactive in our fear. But God's saying, I'm coming to you to test you. And what do you need to pass a test? You need to know things. And so you're getting tested so you can know and develop. Another passage that we can write down, you don't need to turn there, is Psalm 34. But in Psalm 34, literally the whole thing is talking about the proper fear. You know, it's so good. We just need to go there. Psalm 34. It's time. We got time. Psalm 34. Listen to how he talks about fear. Verse 4. Psalm 34:4. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and he delivered me from all my fears. Then you drop down to verse 7. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. O fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Here's verse 11. Come, O children, and listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. When you don't know God, you will succumb to a whole bunch of fears. Those will run your life. And you will live life based off of reactive fears. That's not what the scriptures are telling you to do. They're asking you to step up and to lead based off of reasoned fear. What if I fail? Is God powerful enough to take your failure and use it for something good? Absolutely. What if I don't know what to do? He's given you his word. He's given you a group of people. Like, there's things to accomplish and overcome your fears. But to sit back and to be reactive and to be so paralyzed by fear is never going to happen. You have to depend on supernatural strength. You learn it from the scriptures. You get it from prayer. See, these are simple things, guys, but I hope they change the way that you view spiritual disciplines when we tell you to get involved in spiritual disciplines. We're not saying do the spiritual disciplines so you can come to an event like this and check a box and tell guys, yep, I did my devotions. You do spiritual disciplines so you can get strength to accomplish the will of God. That's why you pray in the morning. That's why you should pray at lunch. That's why you pray at night. You pray because you are saying, I am desperate for your strength, God, and I'm asking you to do that. And just now hear how the humility that's being developed is coming inside of you. Because this is not about me. I realize I can't do it. And the more and more, it's so interesting, what we'll talk about tomorrow with Habakkuk, the more and more you become like the world, whose God was their strength. Do you remember that last time? They worshiped their strength. And God used that foolishness in their heart. And then what did he do? He destroyed Babylon when he was done with it. You can worship your strength for a while, or you can grow in dependence upon God and depend on supernatural strength. That comes through prayer. I've been thinking a lot about this recently, guys. I would really hope that you would prioritize those Sunday morning prayer times that we have now. I get it. It's really difficult, okay? It's hard. My wife and I, we take 2 separate cars. I don't often think for you guys, I know it's hard because you typically take 1 car to work. But can you imagine just sacrificing, hey, you know what? On the 2nd and the 4th Sunday, I'm going to make sure I'm at that prayer time at church because I believe the church needs to have supernatural strength. Or people in your small group, you guys take small group prayer requests at the end. How many times have you called somebody up midweek and then just prayed with them? Like, how many times have you done that? Or have you just heard it in a small group? Yes, we will pray. We spend 5 minutes doing that there, and then the rest of the week. Is that the way people in the Bible prayed? What did Jesus? Hebrews chapter 5. Loud cries, he prayed to God so that he could fulfill what God wanted him to do. That was Jesus. Does that match your prayer life? Should be a desperation for that. We got to fear God. We got to have that supernatural strength so we fear the right thing. Go back to Nehemiah chapter 6. What else should we do? As you're turning there, back to Nehemiah. Proverbs 29:25 says, the fear of man brings a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord will be safe. It's a great thought. The fear of man, that will stop you from doing a lot of things. But trusting in the Lord will make you safe. Nehemiah chapter 6. Notice what else happened. Nehemiah chapter 6. They wanted to stop the work. He said, strengthen the work of my hands. So verse 10, he says, now I'm going into the house of Shammai, the son of Delaiah, the son of Methabel, who was confined to his home. And he said, let us meet together in the house of God within the temple. Let us close the door of the temple, for people are coming to kill you, and they're going to try to kill you by night. But I said, should such a man as I run away? And what man such as I could go into the temple and live? I will not go in. And I understood and saw that God had not sent him, but that he had pronounced the prophecy against me, because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. For this purpose he was hired, that I should be afraid and act in a way in sin, and so they could give me a bad name in order to taunt me. Do you see what is happening with sin and fear? It's trying to get you to act in a way that is antithetical to the Word of God, so now you can lose your credibility that we just talked about and make no difference for the name of Jesus Christ. You have to pray against this sinful fear. You have to gain supernatural strength to do that. But notice what Nehemiah is doing here. He's a man who's living obedient to the Word of God. So number 2, steadfast obedience will get rid of this type of sinful fear. Steadfast obedience. When you obey in the face of fear, that's how you put it to death. I was watching a movie. It was a war movie recently, and it was such a stunning scene. I remember it. There was these 2 guys, and they were fighting against an enemy that had crashed in front of them. And one guy said, "Hey, we should kill this guy right now." And the other guy said, "No, we should help our enemy." And what happens is the guy who says we should help the enemy ends up getting killed by the enemy. And I thought, no, you got to put sin to death. You don't treat it like, oh, I'm going to resuscitate this. I'm going to keep it alive. Paul says, put to death what is earthly in you. Sinful fear is what is going to take you, and it's going to make you incapable of doing what God wants you to do. And you're going to end up doing what was said here. I'm going to act in this way in sin. What specifically was going on? Well, Nehemiah was being tricked into going into the temple, where places he shouldn't go because he wasn't a priest. Specifically, if you want a verse on that, you can write down Numbers 18:7. Clearly tells you if you're not a priest to go, you don't go in there. But can you think of any stories in the Bible where it went wrong for somebody who went into the temple when they shouldn't have? King Uzziah, right? He gets prideful, he goes in, and the end of his life, he is a leprous man until he dies, because he doesn't follow what the scriptures say. But Nehemiah here is a man of conviction. I know I shouldn't go in there, so you're trying to get me to do something that the Bible tells me clearly I shouldn't do. This is clear that I shouldn't do that. I'm not going to do that. You're trying to get me to fear. So steadfast obedience. Turn with me to Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11. If you remember, we did Hebrews 11 over the summer-ish during that quarantine time. We were talking about Noah during that time. And listen to the way it describes Noah. By faith, Noah, Hebrews 11:7, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, here we go, in reverent fear, constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. Noah had to be a man who led, and he led amidst a generation that was very disturbing, very destructive, very sinful. But he was marked out and different because he followed the commands of God. I was struck by it as we listened to it on the Dwell app. From Genesis 6 to 8, you can go through and count the amount of times it says, Noah did what the Lord commanded. That's what made him an effective man, steadfast obedience. And when I obey the Lord, I don't need to fear the consequences of what comes to me. And that's what I think is going on here. But if you turn back to Hebrews chapter 5, notice that reverent fear, that same word is used of Christ. Hebrews chapter 5. Now this is Jesus. Now notice how these two things are coming together in Christ's life, who we are supposed to walk in a manner like Christ. Watch Hebrews 5:7, which says this. In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverence. That's the same word that we had there in Hebrews chapter 11:7. So this is what Jesus was doing, praying, walking according to the commands of God, fulfilling all righteousness. Matthew chapter 3 is what Jesus did. So steadfast obedience is going to keep you from having any sort of sinful fear. But there's one more thing back in Nehemiah chapter 6. Go back to Nehemiah 6. Nehemiah chapter 6. We want to depend on supernatural strength. We want to develop steadfast obedience. Nehemiah chapter 6. We want to shy away from the spotlight. Notice what verse 15 says. Oh, actually, back up to verse 14. Nehemiah 6:14. Remember Sanballat and Tobiah, O my God, according to the deeds that they did, and also the prophetess Noadiah and the rest of the prophets who wanted to make me afraid. So those people were against Nehemiah, and they were trying to get him to fear. And so what is Nehemiah doing? But praying, God, you take care of them. I don't need to be the one who's going to take care of those people. This is leave room for the wrath of God. This is not me stepping in and taking judgment where I shouldn't be doing that. I'm going to leave that up to God. But God, don't let me fear them. Verse 15 says this. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month of Elul in 52 days. And when all our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us, here we go, were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem. For they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. So number 3 on your outline, shy away from the spotlight. If you want to get rid of sinful fear, shy away from the spotlight. If leadership is about you, that's what you're going to fear. And you're going to do everything you can to keep yourself in the spotlight. Here, Nehemiah was a man that cared that the work of God got done for the glory of God. And when he did so, watch what happened to the other nations. The other nations are coming in and trying to get the Israelites to be afraid. And now that God has come in and made them successful, they fell into their own trap. They're afraid. They're fearing because they've seen God clearly at work. So when I depend on supernatural strength and I'm steadfast in my obedience, God is going to do great things through that, and he's going to do so for his glory. They perceived that this work had been accomplished by the help of our God. As a Christian man right now, is there anything you desire more than that? That people in your office would look at your life and go, his God is at work. That people would take a look at your marriage and go, God is at work. That is not something that he is doing. Something bigger is there. How does that happen? Unless you're doing the things that God wants you to do. And you can't go after the spotlight. And so again, they tried to trick Nehemiah into meeting with Tobiah. And hey, Tobiah's a good guy. You should meet with him. And verse 19, he says, they spoke of the good deeds of Tobiah in my presence and reported his words to him. And Tobiah sent all these letters to make me afraid again. The enemy wants to make you afraid. And if you think that fame or the credit for anything has to go to you, you're going to be sinfully afraid. You're going to do things that are not right in order to keep the spotlight on you. But if you want the spotlight to be on God, you're going to follow hard after that. So guys, really, I think this is a good time for us as men to step back and go, what is hindering me from leading? And if it is fear, I have to put sinful fear to death and let the fear of God rule my life. So we're going to take a few moments here to discuss that on the back of your worksheets there. And let's pray right now that God would give us the supernatural strength we need in order to glorify him. God, it's good for us to take a look at a man like Nehemiah, consider the great work that you did through him. And Father, the priorities that he had, the focus that he maintained, all of it, God, was due to the fact that he wanted the praise to go to your name. The prayer in chapter 1 is all about the name of God. And so, Father, I pray that these men, and myself included, would be concerned with the name of God, that we would not live in fear. God, I think sinful fear keeps us from leading, and that is against what you want for us. God, give us the fear of you so that you might be glorified. And we ask this all in your Son's name. Amen.